Gentleman yields back. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Crow.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you both of you for being in here today. I wanted to join my colleagues in expressing deep sympathies for the families of those service members who we lost in Lithuania. And General Cavoli, thank you for responding very rapidly and working with our allies to make sure that we had recovery operations going. And I also want to join my colleagues in thanking you for your incredible service during your tenure. You met challenges throughout Europe that we haven't seen since World War II. You did so with extreme competence, diligence, and discipline, and that was seen by many folks on the Hill as well as our allies, and we are very grateful for your leadership. Turning to Ukraine, in the initial stages of the war, the Ukrainians were able to destroy a very large percentage of the conventional land forces of Russia. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Over half by most estimations.
Right. Would have to think of it as a rolling figure because they were growing at the same time as they were losing. But yeah, those are about the kind of numbers. We're looking at about almost 4,000 tanks, Russian tanks, destroyed by Ukraine in this country.
But since that time, Russia has, with surprising speed, been able to recapitalize and rebuild both its industrial base, but also its conventional forces, and replace a lot of that equipment and personnel. Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
How would you characterize China's involvement in that recapitalization, both the industrial component as well as the military component?
We could talk a lot more about this in closed session, sir, and perhaps we'll have the opportunity to. But there has been contributions. Some of them have been indirect by absorbing much of Russian-sanctioned oil exports and gas exports. They have been able to continue to provide funds that have enabled Russia to continue to build their military. Some have been more direct. Some have been through commercial ventures that may or may not be supported by the Chinese Communist Party. And beyond that, I think I'd be safest to talk to you about it in closed session, sir.
So, and we'll convene in closed session, but both directly and indirectly, economically, and to some degree militarily, China has chosen sides here.
Oh, certainly. You know, I think there's an important side note, Congressman. Sometimes I've been asked, well, they're only giving them moral support, and I typically respond, but that's the most pernicious type of support.
But it's more than moral support, would you say?
And it is.
Yes. Okay. So they have determined that it's in their interest to support Russia in this conflict.
It would appear so.
Okay. Ms. Thompson, this administration has taken a hard line on China in a number of big ways, trying to reestablish and balance that relationship. Would you agree that China has chosen sides in the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Yes, with the caveat, right, that you highlighted, which I think is actually really, really important, in that it aligns with their interests. Insofar as perpetuating this conflict or other conflicts aligns with their interests, I think that's where we will see the adversary alignment, and that's why it's so important from the context of this administration, right, to get the work streams correct so that the U.S. can focus on deterrence in the Indo-Pacific, avoiding conflict there, while our European allies really step up.
The Chinese have determined it's in their interest to support Russia both directly and indirectly.
I would echo General Cavoli's comments. It appears so.
Okay. So given that, would you agree that it's in our interest to support Ukraine if China has determined it's in their interest to support Russia?
I would perhaps take it a step further, Congressman, depending on how you look at it, which is I think that's the impetus for trying to get to peace in Ukraine so that we don't continue to burgeon that relationship or continue to allow the interests to overlap, particularly given the situation, and I know I don't speak for Indo-PACOM, but particularly given what
you're not willing to say, though, it's in our interest to ensure Ukraine is successful in this conflict.
From our vantage point within the administration, I think that's why the prioritization imperative is placed on peace.
But the lack of ability to say that it's America's interest for Ukraine to prevail in this continues to be staggering to me, because our adversaries, our competitors, have been very clear about the sides that they have chosen here and who they think is in their best interest to prevail militarily, and yet we are unwilling to do that. And there's a lot of talk about peace through strength, But if you're not willing to actually say the thing, if you're not willing to actually call it out and take sides, I don't see how we can be strong in that regard. So I will continue to urge, along with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, that the administration is very clear in its rhetoric about who we will support here. I yield back.